Among the Looney Tunes staple of characters, Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck are obviously the biggest ones, but I would personally put Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner up there as well. Through their several chases in the American desert, they provided plenty of laughs and are so ingrained into the popular culture, it's difficult to see a coyote and a roadrunner out in the wild and not think of them. It's also remarkable how lasting so many of the classic Wile E. and Roadrunner cartoon gags and sound effects are. The characters came from Chuck Jones and storyman Michael Matisse, who found the humorous possibilities of a coyote trying to eat a roadrunner with little luck. Jones recognized the coyote as an animal that was constantly hungry, so what would happen if he went to desperate lengths to catch his prey and failed every time? Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner made their debut appearances in the 1949 cartoon Fast and Furious, which immediately established the trademarks that would come to define the characters, including inventive fake Latin names for them, and Wile E. using different products to catch that bird. Setting the cartoons in Monument Valley was a particularly inspired idea, with the wide open spaces and various rock formations allowing for all kinds of gags. The setting is just as much a character in those cartoons as the two lead animals are. Probably the most famous gag involved Wile E. falling all the way down to the ground in an overhead shot. There's also the classic bit where Wile E. paints a fake tunnel which the Roadrunner runs through, but Wile E. slams right into it. And then there's his frequent usage of Acme products, which pretty much always blow up in his face. Why he keeps coming back to Acme when nothing they make works for him, who knows? Maybe as a discount, or maybe they're the only company that ships his location. Of course, because the Looney Tunes function on cartoon logic, it does not matter how many times he falls off a cliff or gets pulverized by a boulder, he's going to be up and running again in the next scene. The Roadrunner often uses his smarts to outwit Wile E., including scaring him with his iconic meep meep sound. That sound was provided by background artist Paul Julian, who primarily worked under Friz Freleng, but he caught the attention of Chuck Jones as he often made that sound at the studio to get people's attention. He recorded the meep meep for Fast and Furious, which will be reused in the subsequent cartoons, and is usually still played whenever the Roadrunner makes an appearance because why mess with perfection? Julian had a long, extensive career providing background art for not just Warner Brothers projects, but even designing the titles for a few Roger Corman productions and drawing backgrounds for Ferngully: The Last Rainforest. Something I have to confess is that, as a child, I did find the antics of Wile E. and the Roadrunner to be a tad repetitive, and admittedly that is a bit of a formula, which would make it seem like each cartoon follows the same pattern. However, looking at the cartoons years later, I began to appreciate the incredible timing of the gags, and that there was some variation in the shorts. Years later, Chuck Jones would claim that there were 9 specific rules that had to be followed in the Wile E. Coyote and Roadrunner cartoons. These included that the Roadrunner had to stay on the road, and they could only harm Wile E. by saying meep meep. However, there were cartoons that broke from these rules, and Michael Matisse counteracted Jones' claim by saying he did not remember these rules when they were making them. Wile E. did not just try to catch the Roadrunner, as there were also a series of cartoons where he attempts to outsmart Bugs Bunny. Wile E. would speak in these cartoons, where he was voiced by Mel Blanc, and presented himself as a sophisticated fellow, including giving Bugs a card with the word genius under his name. This proved to be an inspired pairing, and allowed for a different dynamic, especially with Wile E. directly communicating with Bugs. By the way, one of those cartoons has Wile E. ask a computer for ideas on how to catch bugs, rather than coming up with his own. Oh, those wacky cartoon premises! From the introduction up until the closing of Warner Brothers cartoons, Wile E. Coyote and Roadrunner shorts were directed by Chuck Jones, although he would sometimes co-direct with a few collaborators, like Maurice Noble and Abe Levital. Meanwhile, Michael Matisse was the storyman behind most of the cartoons. They really seemed to have a handle on these characters and what made them funny. Curiously, Chuck Jones would create a very similar character in everything from his design to his actions with Ralph Wolf, except instead of a roadrunner, he would often try to catch sheep on a farm. The similarities are hard to ignore, but is it really a rip-off when you're ripping off yourself? Following the closure of the animation unit, Warner Brothers would outsource the cartoons to other studios. Friz Freleng and Ron McKinson would each give the character a go, but then Rudy LaRiva would direct the cartoons from then on. LaRiva's Wile E. and Roadrunner cartoons are generally considered a major step down from the Chuck Jones entries, with the timing being off and the animation not having the same spark. Like the other Looney Tunes characters that would find a new life on television, with the cartoons being rerun in various formats over the years. The Roadrunner even got top billing on a few of these compilation shows and received his own catchy theme song. Stanley Kubrick would cleverly use the Roadrunner show and its theme song in a scene in The Shining, where we see Danny watching television, which I long took as a sly nod to Jack Torrance becoming like Wile E. Coyote with his eventual pursuit of his wife and son. Chuck Jones will get to return to the characters a few times, including educational segments on the Electric Company. He also directed segments in 2 television specials. In one of those, Wile E. does finally catch the Roadrunner. However, because he has shrunk down in size, there's nothing he can do about that. Jones would also direct the theatrical short Chariots of Fur in the 90s. A Of course, the two of them would continue to make appearances on a variety of Warner Brothers animated shows, like Tiny Toon Adventures and Animaniacs. Plus, there were the theatrical movies like Space Jam and Looney Tunes Back in Action, which showed Wile E chasing the Roadrunner as usual. Wile E's appearance in Back in Action was especially memorable, with him even working for the chairman of the Acme Corporation to catch the heroes. Of course, he uses the machines and they backfire on him. He even has one scene opposite the chairman where he runs off and finds himself getting into various accidents, and another scene where he overdoes it with the traps. In the early 2010s, when Warner Brothers sought to revive the Looney Tunes for a few projects, Wile E, Coyote, and the Roadrunner were especially popular. Matthew Callahan directed 4 computer-animated cartoons, 3 of which played in front of WB Family Films. Curiously, the 4th one, Flash in the Pane, only played at Annecy and did not get a wide release of any kind, but it did eventually make its way online. I've long been an admirer of these cartoons, with Callahan doing an exceptional job of translating the style and humor of Looney Tunes to CGI. Meanwhile, the Looney Tunes show included CG segments with Wile E and the Roadrunner, but only during the first season. For the series Wabbit, they probably used a Wile E similar to the one that went up against Bugs Bunny, with him often using his inventions to mess with his neighbor. J.P. Karliak provided his voice here and brought the right know-it-all attitude to the role. The traditional dynamic between Wile E and the Roadrunner would also show up in Tiny Toons Looniversity. While Wile E was the dean of Acme Looniversity in the original series, he was the science professor here, and often still trying to catch the Roadrunner. In one of the best episodes in the show, he attempts to remove the Roadrunner's cartoon DNA, which causes animated characters to be invincible against destruction, but accidentally affects the rest of the campus, instead with humorous results. Wile E. Coyote has recently gotten a fair amount of headlines for the upcoming film Coyote vs. Acme, which has gone through quite the journey getting to the screen. The movie was based on a New York article written by Ian Fraser about Wile E suing the Acme Corporation over their faulty products, although Joey Gray wrote a similar series of articles for the National Lampoon well before that. After completing production, it was revealed that Warner Brothers would run out for the movie for tax purposes, which angered many people. Also, sadly, an example of how Wile E cannot catch a break. Eric Bauza voices several Looney Tunes in Coyote vs. Acme, even remarked about this at the Annie Awards.
It could have been wise, Daffy. We could be Wile E. Coyote right now. I hate to be political, but relief! Coyote versus Acme!
But thankfully, Catch Up Entertainment picked up the American distribution rights and helped sell it to other territories, with the film set to be released this August. The passionate response to Coyote vs. Acme potentially being canned probably came from not only the outrage that Warner Brothers would do this with a finished film, one produced by James Gunn no less, but the genuine affection people still have for these characters, including Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner. Chuck Jones and Michael Matisse got so much comedic mileage out of this simple concept, and that other artists and writers continue to find fun uses for them speaks to their longevity. And while I mentioned many of their appearances, they have made several others in Warner Brothers history, across animation, television, and commercials. Whether Wile E is trying to lure the Roadrunner with some birdseed under a box, or holding up a sign with some phrase, audiences will continue to watch the antics for a very long time and see what desperate lengths that Coyote will go to eat that fast-moving bird. See you next time.